Hello everyone. We know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, have no worries. I'm Aaron Porras, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review. At least 21 people, including a police officer, have been confirmed killed. 28 were hospitalized and 19 are still considered missing following the devastating terror attack on a Nairobi, Kenya luxury hotel. Additionally, the Somali-based Islamist terror group Al-Shabaab has since claimed responsibility for the Tuesday assault at the Dusit D2 hotel complex. And 2 suspects have also been arrested for aiding the terror group.
Then I tried to call my wife. The phone was unanswered. I texted her, asked her, "Babe, are you okay? Are you safe?" There was no reply. Then 5 minutes later, I was here called that your wife has been shot, and we have rushed her to Kenyatta Hospital.
I was actually doing a presentation when the explosion went off. I think I don't have words. I just say thank God that we are okay. I think that's all.
It sounded like the way a tire would burst, like 10 of them, 10 tires bursting at the same time. So it was so loud. Yeah, and then there was a lot of confusion. Of course, people were trying to run towards the gate. But then I saw everyone who was running towards the gate was coming back from the gate, now heading to this other opposite direction. Yeah, so from where I was, we just closed the doors, and then gunshots were just being spread all over. From the top, I think they went to the top floor, and then they started spraying bullets.
But after the dust had settled, Al-Shabaab released yet another surprise in that they claimed the attack was in response to United States President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. It's not yet clear how the two are at all related, however, as there isn't any clear connection between the hotel and Israel or the United States. In fact, according to Inspector General Joseph Bionet, of the 21 confirmed victims, 16, including the police officer, were Kenyan, 3 were of uncertain African nationality, and the last 2 were British and American respectively. The American citizen, Jason Spindler, was only later revealed to be Jewish by Chabad in Kenya and a survivor of the 9/11 attacks in New York by his brother. Though according to reports, he was in Nairobi with his own company to advance plans on a mini power grid project for remote locations. The attack began around 3 p.m. local time Tuesday the 15th when armed members of the terror cell threw explosives at vehicles in the parking lot outside the lobby. Then one terrorist entered the lobby and blew himself up, and reports and CCTV footage appears to also show at least 4 gunmen walking around and firing. Sporadic shooting and explosions were reported all the way to around 7 a.m. Wednesday before security forces finally ended the siege.
As Commander-in-Chief, I want to commend the quick and effective response by all our fighting teams for neutralizing all the terrorists involved in the attacks. We have dealt with the threat decisively and shown our enemies and the world that we as a country are ready to deal with any threat to our nation. I also take this opportunity to commend the civilians who looked after one another. For every act of evil that led to injury yesterday, there were dozens of acts of compassion, overflowing patriotism, and individual courage. Over 700 civilians were evacuated to safety from the compound since the start of the attack through the early hours of this morning.
The body of 21-year-old Israeli student Aya Massaroueh from the northern Israeli Arab town of Baka al-Gharbia was found murdered and partially nude Wednesday morning outside a shopping mall in the Australian suburb of Bundura in Melbourne.
This was an horrific attack. This was an absolutely horrendous, horrific attack inflicted on a completely innocent young woman who was a visitor to our city.
And the suspected criminal circumstances of her death are now under investigation, but what we do know already is that the young woman was a student on a year-long exchange program at La Trobe University nearby. Pedestrians discovered her body close to 7 a.m., less than 100 meters from the tram station, and according to The Guardian, Aya's uncle Rami Massaroueh confirmed that Aya was on a video call with her sister at the time of the attack. Apparently the phone had fallen during the assault, but the sister, quote, heard the voices over the phone, end quote. Additionally, Massaroueh's uncle also told ABC News that he was in shock and that just the day before the murder, his wife had mentioned that they should visit Australia because it was very safe and very nice. Now, as for the state in which Massaroueh was found, despite her being partially stripped, authorities are still not confirming reports that the assault was sexual in nature. That being said, police indicated that sexual offenders are, quote, in active line of inquiry, end quote, and that pieces of evidence left by the assailant were found at the scene, including a baseball cap and a t-shirt. So police are confident that they will be able to track down the perpetrator. And meanwhile, Israeli diplomats and the Foreign Ministry's Department for Israelis Abroad are already working to bring Mosawa's body home for burial. Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi officially took over as the next IDF Chief of Staff on Tuesday morning at a ceremony at the IDF's Kiryat military headquarters in Tel Aviv. Kochavi replaces outgoing Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot, who ended his 4-year term in the position yesterday, and the ceremony was attended by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who together with Kochavi's wife pinned the rank of Lieutenant General on the IDF's 22nd and newest chief. Then, after the swearing-in ceremony, Kochavi took the opportunity to thank and salute his predecessor, General Eisenkot. And Eisenkot, who is hanging up his uniform after 40 years of service, returned the compliment, saying at the ceremony that he is leaving behind a competent, prepared, and powerful army that bolsters its strength with wisdom and determination. He added that Kochavi is a commander with the strength and abilities of leadership and command. Netanyahu then used the podium to lay out the challenges before Kochavi, outlining also the threats facing Israel, mainly Iran. He also took the opportunity to send the Islamic Republic a message, saying he advises them to get out of Syria fast because he will continue the Israeli policy of attacking as promised and as we have done without fear and without interruption. Finally, the Prime Minister thanked outgoing Chief Eisenkot as well, quipping that maybe he would go on a backpacking trip to South America, as is customary for young Israelis after completing their army service. As for Kochavi, though, before officially beginning in his role, he'll now head to Jerusalem to pay his respects to the National Hall of Remembrance at Mount Herzl. He'll visit the Western Wall, and then he'll meet with President Rivlin before returning to his office in Tel Aviv. In a shocking change of policy, now former IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot revealed on Sunday to the British Sunday Times newspaper that Israel has indeed been supplying weapons and funding to Syrian rebel groups in the Golan Heights. These claims have been made many times throughout the years, but this is the first time an Israeli official has confirmed such reports, and it came on the same day that Eisenkot admitted responsibility for striking, quote, thousands of targets in Syria as well. Until now, Israel has only ever discussed humanitarian aid shipments and programs like Operation Good Neighbor. Earlier this week, Prime Minister and Defense Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also broke with Israel's tradition of ambiguity in Syria by adding to Eisenkot's comments. He confirmed not only that Israel carried out hundreds of attacks against Iranian and Hezbollah targets, but also that Israel struck Damascus International Airport last weekend, a break from policy that at the time was considered just a campaign ploy.
רק ב-36 השעות האחרונות חיל האוויר תקף מחסנים של איראן עם נשק איראני בשדה התעופה הבינלאומי בדמשק. סבב התקיפות האחרונות מוכיח שאנו נחושים יותר מתמיד לפעול נגד איראן בסוריה בדיוק כפי שהבטחנו.
In his interview with the British Sunday Times, however, Eisenkot continued that the weapons shipments to rebel groups consisted of light munitions for self-defense, while a September report by Foreign Policy magazine quoted alleged Syrian rebel leaders and soldiers as saying Israel was arming and funding at least a dozen different groups to prevent Iranian and Iranian proxy forces from advancing southward. In fact, Foreign Policy wrote that Israel transferred assault rifles, machine guns, mortar launchers, vehicles, and more. That being said, rebel groups in the region still reportedly feel abandoned by Israel, both due to the lack of Israeli intervention during Assad's recapturing of Syrian territory and due to the discontinuing of Israeli military and humanitarian aid that followed.
Outgoing IDF Chief of Staff Gadi Eisenkot told Army Radio this morning that the IDF has found al-Hezbollah tunnels infiltrating into Israel's territory. Eisenkot said that finding the sixth and last tunnel yesterday was done by chance and that it could have just as easily been uncovered in a week or two. Eisenkot praised the IDF's Operation Northern Shield to locate and destroy the Hezbollah cross-border tunnels from Lebanon and said it was a success, though he added that Israel would not cross into Lebanon territory to destroy all the tunnels from the other side, instead relying on its cooperation with UNIFIL to prevent further threats. With regards to Israel's operations in Syria, Eisenkot said that despite his comments to the New York Times about Israel hitting thousands of Iranian targets in the country, and despite Netanyahu's comments in the weekly cabinet meeting claiming responsibility for this weekend's attack in Syria, he stressed that it is important to maintain ambiguity regarding Israel's actions against Iranian consolidation in Syria. With regards to the southern border, Eisenkot said that Gaza still remains a serious threat, but one that is under control by Israel's security forces. He said that the main challenge was to maintain the calm and reinstate the feeling of security for Gaza border communities. These are sentiments that Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan also addressed in an interview to Army Radio today. He said that Israel did not stop its actions in Gaza for one moment despite addressing the northern threat, and stressed that our goal is to maintain the quiet. Erdan, however, warned that Hamas should know that we are not deterred from launching a massive offensive, even including a ground offensive. But he clarified that this is not something that Israel is actively seeking, stressing that we simply want quiet in Gaza for the residents in the southern border communities.
Israeli security forces in the south are on high alert following a weekend of Gazan violence directed at border communities. First, on Friday, around 13,000 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip arrived at the border to burn tires and throw explosives, firebombs, grenades, and stones at security forces. Additionally, according to an IDF spokesperson, rioters crossed into Israel at least 3 times before returning back to the Strip. When Israeli troops returned fire in response to a grenade and stones, 43-year-old Amal al-Taramsi, who regularly attended the border riots, was shot dead. As the weekend progressed, a rocket was then launched towards the Sdot Negev Regional Council in southern Israel on Saturday night. Thankfully, no damages or injuries were reported, but as per policy, Israeli Air Force fighter jets responded by attacking 2 Hamas military targets in Gaza. An IDF statement read that they hit 2 of Hamas's underground structures in the Gaza Strip and that they will continue operating to defend Israeli civilians. Hamas now, on the other hand, is warning Israel against an escalation, accusing Israel of continuously killing, quote, nonviolent protesters in cold blood, end quote, adding that the escalation is dangerous and using fire won't bring security to Israel and its residents. Still, while Israeli officials have already indicated that they have no taste for a renewed war in Gaza, they have also made clear that Israel holds Hamas responsible for any incursion or attack from Gaza, and that no attack will go unanswered. Palestinian terror group Hamas has finally released a group of 3 Italian civilians who were held for over 24 hours after entering the Gaza Strip on Monday. The group of Italians had entered the Strip as part of a diplomatic mission to confirm security preparedness ahead of a visit to Gaza by the Italian ambassador to Israel, but Hamas reportedly suspected that they were secretly Israeli agents using Italian papers. According to reports, Hamas chased the Italians in their armored vehicle with diplomatic plates after it crossed into Gaza. And Hamas even reportedly fired upon the car before the diplomatic team arrived at an UNRWA facility where they sought refuge. Hamas, however, rejects these accounts, saying the Italians' vehicle was not involved in any shooting incident. After they arrived at the UNRWA office, though, UNRWA officials apparently then confirmed the identity and citizenship of the Italians, but to no use. Hamas military forces surrounded the UNRWA building and held everyone inside for over a day. It wasn't until after the Italian ambassador to Israel spoke with Hamas head Ismail Haniyeh that they were checked again and released. Now, while the case seems to have resolved, the incident does bring attention to Hamas's state of mind with respect to Israeli incursion. The Gaza terror organization has long accused many of cooperating with or spying for the enemy, even dolphins. But since the November IDF raid that ended in the death of an Israeli officer and sparked massive rounds of Gaza rocket fire, Hamas has seemingly been especially on edge. Speaking of weekend attacks, on Friday, after attempting to stab an Israeli soldier on duty near Hebron, a Palestinian suspect was shot and arrested. The attempted stabbing took place at the army outpost near the Kiryat Arba settlement, and IDF soldiers on hand opened fire, neutralizing the attacker. He was then taken to the hospital with his injuries. Thankfully, no other injuries were reported, though, and in fact, it turns out that an armed Israeli civilian also fired at the suspect during the attack. Then, in response to the incident, the IDF has reportedly dispatched more soldiers to the area. Violence in the West Bank didn't end there, though, as hundreds of protesters gathered in Ramallah overnight on Saturday, burning tires and throwing rocks at Israeli security forces. 2 soldiers were lightly wounded and hospitalized, but were released hours later. Both Ramallah and Hebron are often flashpoint areas for violence between Israeli soldiers and Palestinians, but all in all, security services still maintain that the overall number of attacks is down. As a testament to the fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan paid a visit to the headquarters of the Israel Police Special Anti-Terror Unit, and while there, they commented on the unit's recent cooperation with the Shin Bet and successes like catching the terrorists who attacked Ofra, Barkan, and Givat Asaf in recent months. Netanyahu said that the citizens of Israel need to know that whoever attacked or murdered an Israeli citizen in the past year was either eliminated or apprehended, and that this is an unparalleled achievement in the world, thanks to the daring, heroism, creativity, and commitment of these units.
Now, back in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu toured the Upper Galilee along the Lebanese border on Sunday, where he again vowed to do whatever was necessary to prevent Iran from gaining a foothold in Syria, including, of course, increasing aerial assaults on Iranian and Iranian proxy targets.
ב-48 השעות האחרונות ישראל תקפה מחסן של נשק איראני בשדה התעופה הבינלאומי בדמשק. זה משקף את המדיניות העקבית שלנו והנחישות האיתנה למנוע התבססות צבאית של איראן בסוריה, ואם צריך, אנחנו גם נעצים את ההתקפות הללו. במקביל, צה"ל חשף מנהרה שישית שחצתה לתוך שטח ישראל, מנהרה הגדולה מכולן. זה מביא בעצם את מבצע מגן צפוני לסיומו המוצלח. אנחנו נמשיך לעקוב אחר כל הפעילות של חיזבאללה, של איראן וגרורותיה, ונעשה מה שצריך כדי להבטיח את ביטחון ישראל.
Now, some have shrugged off these latest comments as just a political game ahead of elections, but others have criticized the Prime Minister for breaking with traditional Israeli policy, i.e. not publicly acknowledging Israeli strikes in Syria in order to avoid unnecessary returns and provocations. Still, most agree with the overall message to prevent Iran from advancing at all costs. That's why it's also likely that Netanyahu, as foreign minister, will accept U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo's invitation to attend an upcoming security summit in Warsaw, Poland. It's set for next month, and according to Israeli Channel 10 News, the conference on Iran, organized by the U.S. and Poland, aims to bring together as many foreign players as possible to counter the growing threat. Even many Arab countries which have no diplomatic ties with Israel, like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the UAE, will be in attendance. According to a critical new report released Monday by international watchdog group NGO Monitor, the World Council of Churches is engaging in anti-Semitic rhetoric and in training programs for BDS activism. In fact, NGO Monitor says that the significant problems in this report should be seen in light of the anti-Semitism and demonization that emerges from within the WCC, its partners, and affiliated staff. Additionally, several world bodies like UNICEF and the United Nations, as well as Western nations such as the United States, Australia, Germany, Sweden, and Norway, are all major donors to the program. The World Council of Churches, or the WCC, represents a fellowship of 350 congregations totaling nearly 500 million Christians worldwide. And, for the past 15 years, they've been running one of their most successful programs, the EAPPI, or the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel. Since 2002, the EAPPI has sent over 1,800 volunteers to the West Bank to, quote, witness life under the occupation, end quote. Between 25 to 30 volunteers, or ecumenical accompaniers, live in the area for 3 months, documenting supposed abuses and, quote, offering protective presence, end quote. But according to the NGO report, by singling out Israel, EAPPI embodies anti-Semitism as defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's working definition. The EAPPI also emphasizes political advocacy and activism, such as engaging in BDS campaigns both before, during, and after the trip. And finally, among other points, NGO Monitor writes that the EAPPI partners with groups that support BDS, deny Israel the right to exist, and accuse Israel of war crimes. It's not all doom and gloom in the report, however. NGO Monitor offers 3 recommendations to address these issues. For donor nations to develop and implement transparent funding guidelines that are accountable to the public, that Israel create a policy to deal with delegitimization campaigns, and that the WCC stop promoting an ideology that denies Israel's right to exist as a Jewish nation-state.
Now, as newly sworn-in IDF Chief of Staff Aviv Kochavi steps into his role, Iran, his top line item, is already testing his leadership. In spite of the United States' criticisms, the Islamic Iranian regime has just launched one of its 2 scheduled satellites into space. Unfortunately for Iran, though, according to the Iranian Minister of Communications and Information Technology, the Payam satellite did not make it into orbit. Minister Jaromi explained that the rocket simply didn't gain enough speed to reach its desired altitude, though he didn't explain on why the rocket failed. Regardless, the second satellite, Dosti, is still scheduled for launch as planned, and the Iranian Space Agency is still reportedly intent on creating a precise network of imaging satellites by 2025. But it's precisely for this reason that at least the United States and Israel are so concerned. Though Dosti and Payam in Persian mean friendship and message, respectively, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has previously remarked that the White House regards this program as related to improving ballistic missile capabilities, which would be in direct violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions and the JCPOA nuclear deal. Iran continues to claim that they have no intention of obtaining nuclear weapons, however, with Ayatollah Khamenei instead even lashing out at American officials, calling them first-class idiots. Still, judging by the fact that Netanyahu and Trump have persistently called out Iranian aggression in the region, with the Israeli premier also saying Tuesday morning that they always lie, it doesn't look like they're taking Tehran at their word. Despite major international attention and criticisms, Malaysian Foreign Minister Saifuddin Abdullah reiterated Wednesday that the Malay government will not change its mind regarding the refusal to grant visas to Israeli swimmers. Israel has been attempting for a while now to broker an agreement granting Israeli athletes permission to compete in the Paralympics qualifying event in July. The event will host around 70 countries and act as a qualifier round for the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics. But due to the complete lack of diplomatic ties between the two countries of Israel and Malaysia, directors of the Israel Paralympics Committee have had no luck in securing visas. And this new statement from Abdullah only serves to lower the hopes for the Israeli athletes. Malaysia, being a predominantly Muslim country, publicly supports the Palestinian people and has had a long history of issues with Israel. Most recently, Malay officials have been condemning the United States and Australia's acceptance of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, but these latest comments by Foreign Minister Abdullah are especially discouraging, as the Malaysian cabinet has now also decided that Israelis will not be allowed to enter the country for any currently scheduled events, and neither will they host any event in the future that has any ties to the Jewish state. This to, quote, reflect the government's firm stance over the Israeli issue, end quote. All right, that's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next week for the next episode of ILTV's Weekly Review. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you for joining us.